This is the first video in a new series that I'm going to do, where I just talk about the game that you're watching. Previously, as you know, I've tended to use the backdrop of video games to do just talking about stuff within the games industry and other topics and so on and so forth. But this is going to now be just totally focused on the game that you're seeing. So I'm playing Resident Evil 0 on the PlayStation 4, and I got this as part of the Resident Evil Origins collection, which includes the original Resident Evil. These games were remastered for the PlayStation 4 and for the next gen consoles and PC. Originally, Resident Evil 0 came out in 2002 on the Nintendo GameCube. That was the original format it came out on, and it was one of the games that made me want to get a GameCube. I was a big fan of Resident Evil on the PlayStation, and I was somewhat miffed when the PS2, GameCube, Xboxes were announced that the rights for Resident Evil, the main series of the games, had passed over to Nintendo. Now, you could still get the spin-off games on the PlayStation 2, but unfortunately at the time when the consoles were released, Nintendo really did steal quite a march on Sony in getting Capcom tied into this. Now, that fell by the wayside as that generation went on. The PlayStation 2 was so phenomenally successful, especially compared to the GameCube, which didn't really perform anywhere near as well as the PS2. When Resident Evil 4 came out, Capcom eventually released that too on the PlayStation 2. They released it on other formats as well later on, but certainly that whole exclusivity deal fell by the wayside rather quick. But when the GameCube came out, it wasn't, and so this was one of the games, as well as the remastered Resident Evil, which I'll also be doing a video for, that made me want to buy a GameCube. And I love this game. It was one of those ones that kind of divided Resident Evil fans somewhat. Some people didn't like it, they thought it was a bit crappy. Others really liked it. I really liked it because whereas it maintained the original feel of the Resident Evil series, that sort of fixed camera angles, moving around the environment, picking things up type of thing, it also introduced some new elements as well, which previously Resident Evil games didn't have. The first thing that you'll notice when you play the game is that there aren't any item boxes. Now, previously, what was commonly referred to as the magic item box, because what you stored in one box in one location automatically teleported to a box in another location. Capcom did away with this, and they introduced the system which, for some people they liked it, other people they didn't, but you can just drop items on the floor. Now, that to me made more sense. There was nothing more frustrating in the original Resident Evil games of suddenly discovering that your inventory was full and that you had to go backtracking all the way across the map to an item box to drop stuff in there, then go all the way back to the location where you needed the item. Just being able to drop the item makes far more sense. And the items remain where you leave them, so you can go back to them, and it kind of introduces another strategic element to the game, because you can leave weapons in locations and know that you can go back and get them without having to go traipsing or find another item box somewhere. So that was one of the first big changes that I noticed when I started to play the game. The second big change is the ability to actively switch between characters. In Resident Evil 0 there are two main characters, Rebecca Chambers, who you've seen here, and she was a character that was introduced in the original Resident Evil on PlayStation 1. She's the medic that you find partway through the game. And they introduced a new character called Billy Cohen. Now each of the characters have unique abilities. I don't want to go too much into it because I don't want to spoil the experience for people that might be playing the game and have never played it before. But it introduced an interesting dynamic. Now you were always able to choose between different characters, well, 2 different characters in the previous Resident Evil games, but you were never actually able to do it at the same time. It was either you had to select which one it was before you start, or it was a character that was on a different disc, a la Resident Evil 2. But in this game, you're able to just press one button and immediately switch between characters. The scene you're seeing here is where you get introduced to Billy Cohen for the first time. And this also introduces a different dynamic. Now, when the AI is with you, or the second character, should I say, is with you, and you're going through the game, the AI will take over. So it's not like you're having to constantly switch just to move to a different room. They'll follow you. But what you can do is leave one of the characters in a particular room while you go off to another, and there will be times where you'll need to do that in order to overcome certain puzzles and get through certain parts of the game. And the extra strategy you have to be careful of here is when you do that, they can get in trouble. Even though they'll try to defend themselves, they can get in trouble. So you need to be mindful that the characters still need to be looked out for. They start getting overwhelmed, you'll get an alert to say that they're in trouble, so you can quickly hot switch over to that character. Or if you're in a relatively close location yourself, you can run there. It just introduces a different dynamic to the game that hadn't been there previously. And that's what I really enjoyed about Resident Evil 0, was the fact that they did try to change things up while still keeping the traditional Resident Evil style going. It's a very difficult thing to do. And what's interesting is this was in the main series of the games. So when I say the main series of the games, I mean games that Resident Evil 0, Resident Evil 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. That's the main line of the game, whether you want to call it the legacy range or whatever. There are spin-offs, obviously, because you have Code Veronica, you have like the more sort of squad based ones that was out there and stuff like that. You have the Revelations series, but this was the main line in the series, the spine of the series, as it were. And although other stories do link in and link out, when I talk about the main series, that's what I mean. So Resident Evil 0 was very much the last game that was made that actually, in the main series of games, it still maintained this original style of play. Resident Evil 4 was a big difference. That went to a more third-person, had more shooting, it was more action-based, and that was a great game in of itself. But unfortunately, it did lead to the series going way off kilter with Resident Evil 5 and 6, which just virtually ditched the survival horror elements and became more all-out action, which was really disappointing for me because I like the survival horror elements of Resident Evil, and when you take the series down the more action-based path, I think you lose a lot. It's interesting that Capcom is going more back to the survival horror roots now with the next Resident Evil, so I'm really looking forward to see what they do there. So though I've covered some of the differences there, there are other differences. There's different locations. So, I mean, what you're seeing here is at the start of the game, you're on a train, and again, it introduces a different dynamic, different elements, and as I say, you end up on going to different locations and so on and so forth. So you have an Umbrella training facility, for example. That's where you end up going next. And again, I'm not going to give away too much. If people haven't played the game and want to experience the game, I don't want to spoil it by giving away information with regards to the location. So this eventually came out also on the Wii. There was a version released on the Wii. It's out on PC, PS3, PS4, Xbox 360 and Xbox One. And as I've already mentioned, you can buy it separate, or you can buy it part of the HD collection. And you can get that Resident Evil Origins collection as well on disc, which, you know, again, it's something that I prefer to own it on disc. I like having the collection there on the shelf, and it's good. It is. I really enjoy it. If you like Resident Evil games and you like these type of games, the survival horror type games, I think it's well worth investing in. I don't think it deserves some of the negativity that it got given, and I think that was... Sometimes I wonder whether people just kick back against something if a game comes out and it's not on a format that they own. Automatically they seem to want the game to fail, or it tends to get tainted with a bad reputation. But when I've played through this, and I've played through this from beginning to end, I really didn't find anything to dislike about it. I think that, you know, how good is it compared to the original Resident Evil games? Well, I don't know. I mean, I enjoyed them, but it's to me, it's a prequel to those games. It tells the story of what happened before the STARS team goes to the Spencer Mansion, which is where Resident Evil starts. This is the lead up to that. And I personally don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think it's very well done. What's interesting is, in playing this on the PS4, sometimes you can see cutscenes that look like they were specifically remastered for the next gen consoles, and other times you'll see cutscenes where there is a difference. There's a notable degradation, and those cutscenes look like they were taken, just lifted directly from the GameCube version, which is a little bit bizarre, and I'm not too sure why that is. You'd have to play the game to find out. When you're watching a video like this, sometimes it's a little bit difficult for you to see it, but there are some cutscenes where the quality of the graphics really does look better and really looks more current gen or remastered. And then there are other scenes which you can tell, because it has like I guess it's like a blurriness to it, and the sort of textures, the character animation, the character models don't look as detailed. And, you know, sometimes it throws you out a bit. It's like, why didn't they go the full hog and redo all of it? And I guess what it's going to probably boil down to is time versus money. Don't these things always? And that is something that sort of, yeah, it's not off-putting, and I wouldn't say it was enough to make you not want to play the game. It's just a curiosity for me. It was just a bizarre thing that I noticed while I was playing through it. I'm like, I don't really understand why they've done this. Why didn't they just rework all of the cutscenes to the same quality level? Why did they only do some? There might be a technical reason for it, but I'm going to guess it just sort of boiled down to what they felt they could get away with, because when they're doing these type of remasters and reissues, they don't want to get bogged down in spending a huge amount of money on something that may or may not end up being successful. But anyway, that's all I've got to say about this. Thanks for watching this video. I'd say this game's well worth checking out if you haven't done already, and stay tuned to my channel for more videos like this to come. Thank you for watching.